So let's talk about one more guideline I often fell victim to when I first started designing logos, and one of the ways we can actually overcome it. So this logo guideline is called purposeful because you want to design logos that solve a problem and that have a purpose for existing. Because designing random shapes, well, anyone can do that. But because you're a logo designer, you know how to solve visual problems and approach them in a way that can help the brand that you're working with become better connected with your community or with their audience and any other numbers of actual problems that you're trying to figure out, solve, and visually communicate. So, with this purposeful design, you want to create something that's going to have a reason for existing. So, if you're going to create a logo, it's going to have some kind of purpose for being used, whether it's going to connect with the audience better, be a better symbol to be able to market the company better. It has to have some kind of reason for existing. You're not just going to whip up some symbols and expect it to be used by the client. There has to be some reason on why that particular symbol or typeface was chosen. And there's a number of research that you can do towards this. Before you actually start designing, it's often very smart to actually look into the brand you're working for, the client you're working for, and start researching for them. And if you can start researching for them, you can start formulating an idea of what you're trying to design. And if you can actually answer that question, what am I designing and how is it going to be used and for whom it's going to be used, the design that you're going to be creating is going to be able to connect with the client much, much better. So, for example, if you're designing for some kind of educational school or an educational course, and you start researching the different types of fonts used in this area and the different types of symbols and icons used to represent education or growing or growth, then you can get a better idea of how this logo is going to communicate better with your audience. Because you would be able to choose, let's say, a typeface that has a lot of serifs in it and that looks very professional and kind of screams education. So, a very good one would be, for this case, would be Bree Serif. And you're using the font Bree Serif because you know that it communicates education. You know that it communicates high class and that it communicates learning almost. It's a subconscious level, but you are able to communicate those types of symbols and those types of ideas through your designs. So that's a very big point that you should be designing and researching at the same time to create this purposeful designs. Because often not, you might see a trend on Dribbble or Behance or some kind of cool idea that you may have laying around in the back of your notebook, and you may just try to implement that into a logo design for the client. So if you're really into vintage logos, this recent month, you might try to make a vintage logo for your client. But if your client's trying to be modern and he's not exactly trying to go retro and hit that particular demographic, then you're not creating a design with purpose. You're creating a design for yourself, and it's not solving any visual problems. But there's also a way to look at purposeful designs from a macro and micro view. So the macro view is, does this design solve a problem like we just talked about? So using a very serif-based font, well, that's showing that we're trying to communicate education and some kind of very classy presentation style. But there's also a macro view. So if you look at your logo, you can nitty-bit each part of the logo, each type of roundness or each type of line or shape that you use in the logo, and ask yourself the question, does this serve a purpose? Because many times you're designing a logo and you start throwing in elements in there like curves that might not particularly need to be there, or even strokes that aren't, instead of, let's say, one stroke around a logo, you throw two strokes around a logo. That might start overcomplicating it very fast. But if you start breaking down the logo into each individual part and ask yourself the question, does this segment of the logo serve a purpose? Then you'll create a design much more focused around solving something and being more purposeful. Because not all designs need this fancy bevel or not all designs need corner roundings, because you need to break your logo down again and ask that question. Is this going to solve any particular purpose? And is this even needed in the design? Because it's really easy to overcomplicate. You can start throwing in strokes, effects, drop shadows, but if the drop shadow doesn't have a particular purpose for being there, if it's not communicating an idea, if it's not helping the client, if it's not helping the audience, and if it's making the logo even more complicated for no particular reason, then it doesn't have to be there. So the best way to overcome this, of course, is just to research the brand and then design with the research you have at hand. Don't try to bring in Pinterest boards that you have saved beforehand or ideas that you had beforehand coming into this logo, research the logo, formulate your ideas, formulate your sketches, and then design from there. Don't try to bring in other sources. Your purpose is going to get muddled because you'll be designing for yourself, your current client, and then what the previous client rejected idea-wise that you kind of want to redeem yourself through this design, right? It's a mess, and you don't want to do that because then all of your logos, they're not going to be serving a purpose. And imagine writing a case study about your work as well. If you can write in your case study why every certain aspect of your logo exists, why you chose those colors, why you chose those idents, why you chose those shapes, then your case study is going to be 10 times more powerful than a case study that just shows your logo. I think this is a good proposal. Had a few ideas laying around. And I'll see you in the next lesson.